I'm just gonna record. So in this thing on what was it on Back Issue on Facebook, this guy did a post. I shouldn't show his name, but he was talking about all the creators that were kind of around for Superman, and he's saying DC want to save Superman. Is that some accepted, some declined, but either way, it must have been frustrating and stressful for the current teams of Superman in action. You know what he was thinking about. What if Stan Lee walked into the DC offices and took over Superman, that sort of thing, and would he have added so much stuff to it, right? So this led a DC creator, who Paul Levitt, who's a group expert, a top contributor. He says your premise is flawed. Most of the folks you mentioned were never offered to be the lead talent on Superman, much less the mission of saving Superman. John Byrne was made the lead after a number of wonderful folks pitched their views, and even if there wasn't a save Superman, simply relaunched to take advantage of the change in the market and the post-crisis opportunity. Stan turned down his opportunity to run DC in the 70s, but I don't think there was a scenario in which he would have been happy just to come over as a writer or even writer editor on his own material. So in seeing that, I was kind of like, all right, so this is the top guy at DC, and he's like, he's not. So hold on, let's cancel that. He's not saying that Superman needed to be saved. So I was like, that means that they must have been making so much money from Superman outside of the comic books. They must have just been straight because DC, Marvel,
When was
DC.
this? Sorry, when was this?
Oh, that when they wrote that a couple weeks, March. It was actually
No, when you were
March.
talking about the sales for DC, when you were talking about the sales for Superman,
He's talking about all the periods. This all people from the
70s, 80s.
seventies and eighties. So all those people you described. Kirby went to DC. He was only on on Jimmy Olsen. Who else? He was on Jimmy Olsen. Steve Englehart went to DC, but he didn't do Superman. I think some of the Marvel guys were writing it, but I think they never really changed the artist. They still had Kurt Swan, um, Kurt Schaffenberg, all of the regular guys were still there. They did try to fit in. You see different cover artists, but you don't see, besides the main stable of artists, you don't see much changes as far as the art wise on Superman until Gil Kane. Gil Kane is the only kind of, he's the old school, but he was still one of the guys in there. But that led me to say, well, we look at the Comichron, we got the Superman numbers, right? So if we go to like action, right? So if we go to action and we got 1961, I thought the numbers were more astronomical here. But these are, I thought I already put it up. Sorry about that. All right, let me go back. I think if it's usable, right? So we look here in the 60s, that's like 3/4 of a mil in here, right? Of books that are selling. Now this is 8 books a year. This isn't a monthly book. This is 8 books a year. The next year, they cut it to, in 65, they cut it to, it looks like 6 books a year. Well, you know, it's in between 6 and 8. They're switching it up from here and there, but I guess it's still kind of 8 books a year. But they're printing over 1 million copies, and it's still kind of around, 3/4 of a million. But then there's this in 1967, there's like a drop. Now I know in the 70s, Marvel kind of what was it? Marvel Marvel gets able to put out as many titles as they want, and DC has the implosion. But and go to 69, those having sales in 500,000 are good sales. In 70, having sales that's 450,000 is pretty good, but this drastic dip is just really extreme, in my opinion. And I don't understand why DC kind of didn't do anything about it. Like, it's really drastic. I know the 60s are a period where people feel that comic books were about to crash and they weren't going to come back. And it seems like Superman kind of stabilized. This is kind of a good book for Marvel around this period. So it's like 75 to 79. This, 250,000 range is a successful book, but at the same time, it's kind of low for the DC thing, right? Then we get to the 80s, the drop is just ridiculous. Like, this is the X-Men when it was good was in 1980. The X-Men this is selling what the X-Men was in 1980 before it got big in like 81. So it's like this drastic drop with no sign of change is just like, and we had the editor saying that he wasn't in need of saving, right? So, and so you have, it's pretty low here, but then you have I think Byrne isn't the writer, is he? So the sales don't come in until 87, so the numbers go up, and it goes up like, what is that? Like 70,000. It goes up about 70,000. So, but it's like, if you look at these kind of numbers, it's like, if you're the editor, and Paul Levitt was the editor during this, he was one of the top editors at DC, and the writer, like, how do you just look at these things going down so low and be like, well, we got licensing, we got TV show, we got the movie out there, we're subsidized by Warner Brothers, everything's okay.
Yes, it is.
That is really extreme for me, because it's just like, we have the same with Action
No,
Comics.
I agree with what you're saying. It makes sense that as a comic book reader, you're looking at it and you're seeing the sales are going down. But, you know, they're looking at it and saying like, hey, you know what? Probably, like you said, probably outside, because this is only capturing sales from Diamond, right? Diamond Comics.
No,
And
no, this is the things I was showing you on the other thing. Those are the Diamond ones. These are what's the name? The circulation. The circulation orders are printed in the comic book, so it has everything.
Oh,
It
so
has
I
the
thought these.
total.
Because, I mean, I know I read this where they were saying this is only Diamond that they were doing the DC when they separated DC.
No, this is the full deal, because I think like sometimes some of their thing, Capital only shows the comic stores, but these, if you go into the letter pages like once a year, obviously when they say no published data, they didn't do it for that year,
Right.
but they for the whole subscription thing, they had to have this participant of ownership thing that they would have, and they would list these numbers, and obviously some of these had brief numbers, but then as it went along, they had the numbers of the total circulation, the total copies printed, how much sold at the same time. And you can see this is Action Comic Books. Action Comic Books is kind of in where, like people would kill for these numbers now. But these are good numbers for the 60s. It wasn't selling as much as the Superman
Oh,
comic
remember,
book.
there's no unlimited 500 channel videos or TV shows. There's no video games. So the numbers, these all help to eat into some of the stuff. Okay.
I'm not saying it doesn't, but at the same time, you don't as a business, you don't factor into there's more things to pull the kids away. And then you see Marvel, something's happening there, and you're like, well, how are they never competed with us in sales. How are they didn't really, I guess obviously Paul Levitt said that DC asked Stan to come over to run some things, but obviously Marvel probably gave him way more than a regular comic book salary. So, but I didn't know that bit. I didn't know. But it's like here you got Action Comics. It's selling, decently through the '60s and okay in the '70s. But at the end of the '70s, it's like the numbers are like 84. Actually, this is like the start of everything. These are numbers that you could get in 2000 that would be Great numbers. It's 86,000. It's not open. Can you go open this up again? It was close. So let me make sure if we use it, it's like that. But so then we got Burn Get on there. Same with this one. This action is actually more than doubled. It's almost three times what it was. Like action is even more is three times, and to the top guy, that's like yeah, it's just a relaunch and took advantage of the market. It's just like Marvel Comics would be canceled at 61,000 books sold. I thought this would be great, but you're totally
I'm like, it's like you're not selling me on some of the stuff you're telling me. Like,
okay.
give me something like the West Coast Avengers. Like,
I'm not. We're
how are
not
their
talking about.
sales?
I'm talking about. That's I precursor. I'm not. We're not arguing about the West Coast Avengers. We're just talking about. Here's the Marvel comic book, right? We don't have the early numbers for Spider-Man, but this was in '66. This is Marvel's top book, right? These are the numbers. I showed you the numbers for what Superman was. This
Yeah,
is
yeah. I'm not.
this is Marvel's top book. That's a high.
And that wait, I meant to ask you the question though. Is that per month? Or is that per year? Per month, right?
No, that's per year. Yes, circulation, right? So so then we have in this next year, this is how much, they like the total copies printed, and you see in the 70s they felt the comic books were going to crash and Spider-Man is selling less, right? But then in
Yeah.
the 80s it starts shifting. It doesn't go down to that number. And Spider-Man and the X-Men is big. Spider-Man is kind of the number. I'm not sure if it's number two, but it's doing okay. But then like we get to 85 and it just picks up again. And Todd McFarlane isn't even on the book yet. So the Todd the what was it? I guess is this I guess the black costume numbers came in at some point. What would that be? He started going up with the black costume, and
Six.
in '85 it went crazy, but it dipped back down. But yes, I think in my mind, I don't know, Marvel just had to work on the sales and DC didn't. But it's just kind of crazy to me to be like, I don't have any monthly thing because they didn't have petition for ownership for that. Else I would have looked it up to show you.
Hmm. And what about the X-Men in terms of
You don't have the X
now?
Men outside of. I mean, we can. I'd have to go through the comic books to get you the statement of ownership, but by '81 it goes up to like four. I think on average it went up to 450,000. That was the X Men numbers, and that was X Men went from I think Burns said 175 was I think the Death of Phoenix, and it slowly picked up. It started to pick up after Byrne left, and then when he said Paul Smith got on, it just was a juggernaut.
Okay.
I think the only thing I think GI I think
What this shows,
huh?
I mean, what it really shows is just that the industry declined. You know what I'm trying to say? It doesn't show overall. It doesn't show specifically just one title in and of itself, but the whole industry declined.
I'm saying we saw it with Spider-Man, just not as drastic as Superman, and it's hard to look at it and have one of the top guys just be like, hey, it was it was just
Why,
real.
but the question we have to look at is why is he saying that? I mean, that's the problem I don't understand in and of itself. Why would he say that? Because if the numbers are showing us something else, unless he's totally devoid of what the numbers are, right? Let's say, for example,
No,
he doesn't know.
he know the numbers more than I would.
But then why is he saying that? Because the sales here, according to what you're showing me, and I 100% believe it, it doesn't make sense unless they're counting. If we're specifically talking comic book numbers, those numbers are horrible. But if we're saying licensing numbers, probably the licensing is coming in, and he's bringing that money into it, and he's saying, hey, people are still buying super under rules of Superman. They're still buying Superman branded things, and so we're making still money. So it's not a collapse for them. It sees, hey, every year the licensing is still coming in for Superman, so it's a strong character. But those reading the books are like, yo, where the hell is going on with this, bro? You know what I'm trying to say? Does that make sense to you? Could that be what
Yeah,
caused
yeah. That's why I'm bringing it up. I wanted to talk about it only because it feels like when you talk to a lot of people, especially with DC, they're just like, oh, just print the Justice League of Society, you know, print. Why did they do a Earth Two Superman comic book? Why did they do the reboot? They just or what other thing? They people say stuff like that where it's just like they had All Star Squadron, they had another updated book, they had a couple miniseries with the Justice Society in the '80s, but it feels like it never got to a point where it was worthy of getting its own, the original JSA getting their own title. An updated version of them, yes, it seemed like they would do those books were doing okay. Now at the same time, I showed you those sales, but at the same time, DC was giving royalties for like DC Comic Presents. Like people were getting royalties at DC at a lower rate, and then Marvel's threshold. Like Marvel's threshold was way different, but there was royalties to be had at DC, which still puzzles me even more. Like DC had the royalty thing before Marvel, so it's kind of like, and Jim Shooter was like, hey, they did that, but their books sell less, but they were still giving royalties out with books that sold less. So it's just kind of, it's not till I think they say, was it DC was okay with being two until Image came and they were almost three. So when they were kind of like three, it was like, oh, we got to do something. And then they said, let's kill Superman. If you ask them, they would say, no, that was a story we came up with. It wasn't had anything to do with Image. So it's either which
No,
one.
so Pete, I think you called it that. If they were doing as well as this guy's claiming, why kill Superman?
Well, I mean, he's saying that none of those periods that I just showed you that he had to be saved. Like when Kirby comes in and sales are going down, Kirby only got one title, which was the lowest selling title. Um, but at the same time, I think there's nothing going on there that I didn't bring up. Well, no, I did bring up with Superman is that it wasn't regular Superman title wasn't a monthly title, and Marvel titles were pretty much always monthly. And that's the thing. I think DC, like Kirby books that didn't work out, those were 6 times a year. Like books like when X-Men was 6 times a year, Iron Fist was 6 times a year, and those are books that were in danger of being canceled. So it feels like either they're not looking at it, and then kind of late in the game they made the regular Superman title monthly, whereas they might have expanded too much with Superman when it was successful, and then instead of making more issues of the regular Superman title, they have Superboy, Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, and anything else. Adventure was something different. It had the Legion, but it was I guess it was doing okay. But it's just surprising to see that when I look at this and I just kind of like cringe to see, if I was the editor, I wouldn't just be turning around saying, "Yeah, comics will be dead in 5 years," in the '70s, and it's not dead. And Marvel's sitting around there, and you got Jim Shooter saying, "Dazzler sold more than than Superman." It's like that hurts, But
I think it makes sense what you're saying. I think it makes. I just am just thrown off by the whole fact that he's saying there has to be something else there, unless he's just not. He just doesn't get it. So, and it's also possible that he may have not been. Yeah, he's there, but he may have not been the number guy. They don't always share everything with everybody.
I think
We're still making money, so okay.
I would believe that he's the number guy, but I mean, maybe
They
maybe
had
he's
three
not.
Superman movies since that time period, right? There was three
They had
Superman.
they had Superman movies, and that was obviously doing really well for them. But the thing is, I think in the '50s, where Superman was selling, very well, it had the TV show, and then it had also the serials. They had the movies that were in the 40s. I think it was in the 40s when they did the movies. So oh no, the cartoon that was in the movies. That's what I'm trying to say. But it was this multiple interests, but that would kind of feed the comic book to keep this thing like in these really incredible sales, and then you have the Superman movie, and that doesn't translate to. But yeah, we can look at is that 79 or 78? We go to action. Well, it should be like 78.
It
Yeah,
should be a bump.
it goes up a little bit. It's going down. It's at 230. It's at 200. It's at 180, 180,000. Then it goes up a little. There's a little bump there.
Very little. So
That's the
very little.
thing. The Batman TV show kept Batman from being canceled.
But go
So
up. Let's see if in 1980 it makes a difference. Go down.
what do you mean? Oh, here? No, it a
It
bigger.
collapses. It collapses.
Yeah. So that's the hard thing to say. You're
I don't
sitting
know.
there,
It still don't. It doesn't make sense.
and I'm pretty sure somebody was making royalties, probably small ones, but it's
That's
it's a tough thing to say and that's the other thing that I don't understand. If you had something that was that monetarily successful, wouldn't you say he didn't save it, but at the same time it was a sales bonanza, like it was something that really brought a lot of people to the title.
Yep.
I didn't put it. Okay. Um,
I think you made a very good point. I think your premise definitely seems to be makes a lot of sense. Uh, you know, there's a lot of anecdotal evidence that it shows that it wasn't doing well, and that the comic is, so for them to say that, it's really really just weird. I'm trying to say. I mean, there's nothing else to say. It just seems weird.
so yeah, here's an example of a title that got canceled, right? So for Marvel, they're like 79 starts here. That's I guess when the X-Men was struggling, that's kind of that rate, and then by this time, 50 issues, and they got rid of it. Well, about 50 issues of Spider Woman, and they got rid of it. So that's kind of the range of where Marvel will let a title go. I don't think. I guess if Iron Man shows to be that low, right? So Iron Man, this is a second tier character, Iron Man, right? So it's selling better than the X Men. In '85 it goes up to 200,000, but this at one point at 80, I think it's probably matching the X Men. So, but if it had this number before that, this is probably the range for Iron Man for most of its time in comic books. Yeah, so it's really consistent, except for '92, and I think probably the sale bonanza of the X Men and whatnot just pushed it down a little, but it picks up again and then it goes down again. So, but it's pretty consistent as far as its numbers, which is a mid-range seller. Mm. But that kind of shows you why, well, I don't know. It's Iron Man 94, yeah. That's when the dip in 94. This is why obviously they turned it over to Image, where it's like, oh, it's just dipping too far, and then by Image time, it's three times what it was selling. So much needed, and then Kurt Buzik's on there, and it's selling a little less than what it was, but it's pretty decent. But yeah, I just really surprised when I saw that because I was, in my mind when I was thinking about this, I was like trying to say, I was thinking what editorially would they do? I was going to do this a video as saying, hey, you had all these new artists like Neil Adams and Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. I think it's another artist that was doing the covers on Superman, but they didn't become the regular artists. And Superman had always had these change of artists to bring it to the next stage, a new look. But the look that they had from the 50s is the same look they had throughout the 70s, 60s, 70s, and the start of the 80s. So I don't feel, in my opinion, it was going to be, they never changed it. That's why the sales didn't happen. But then when you have Paul Levitt say that, it didn't need to be, he put it in quotes, saved. So what can you do? He's the guy. He would know. Oh, we got Batman here. We don't have Detective, but we get to see the '60s. Yeah, just see what happens when the Batman TV show happens.
Wow, dramatic.
And for those 2 years, it's selling like hotcakes. They're ordering millions of comics, and then when it's canceled, it goes back down, and it's dipping, it's going, it's torpedoing down. No, but it's not actually. These are successful titles, right? In the '80s, this is a decent selling title, right? Even though I don't know why they would say it was going to be canceled if it was that much at this amount of thing, but uh, it's crazy. I'd have to see the numbers before that, but it's in the mid range. That's something. This one, and they had some good people on it, but yeah,
I mean,
there's no
it's
heat
almost like
on.
it's almost like they're getting back to the sales price that they had back then. Because I mean, if you look at the numbers again, you start off at 500,000, and then now in the year 2024, it's at 100. Can you bring up the numbers again? Go down.
Which
Well, on that
one?
list.
Which list? Oh, you
Yeah,
mean all the titles?
it's like 193, which is like almost half, a little bit less than half. It's just crazy. It's just way too much, too low.
Yeah.
So if they were charging it, they weren't charging $1 back in.
No, those are like
They
it
were
goes
charging
from
a dollar
here
back.
like 20, it's like 10 to by 80 it's like 65, 80, 80 is like 50 or 20, was it like 35 cents and 80, and by the end of that it's like going from 65 to 70. 85 it's like, yeah, 65 to 75 cents.
That's it. It's ridiculous.
But yeah, this is what seeing the Batman numbers, even though Batman picks up in yeah, the '80s, it's just like good lord, but it picks up in '87 when after Frank Miller's on it, and it doubles. So, but yeah, but with Paul Levitt saying that it wasn't saved, then I couldn't really do a video saying they should have had this artist. These three guys should have took over the title, and would have had a new look for the period. Because it had the original creator, it had um, a more sleeker version of that than Wayne Boring, and then it had Kurt Swan, and then it was like Kurt Swan from the '50s to '86. So that would be my opinion, but hey.
That's a good opinion. I think you've made a very good case for what you're saying. So thank you for that, Petey. Okay.
All right. So
Hey, if you like what you hear, give us a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and of course, in this one, 100%, we got to give Petey the props. Spinner rack.
we're out.